vote on Saturday. But on Sunday, I'll still be running for president. I'm not going anywhere.
And with that, Nikki Haley has made her intentions clear. She will continue on in this race past the South Carolina primary coming up this Saturday, February the 24th. But that sort of begs some questions. Is this, in the short term, the best thing for her to do in terms of political viability in the race for the GOP nomination? In the long term, is it best for her political future? And finally, is it the best thing to do as far as enhancing her party's chances of winning back the White House? Hang on, folks. We're going to get into all of this in just 1 second. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. In a press conference that began shortly after noon on Tuesday, former South Carolina Governor and United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley announced, to no one's really big surprise, that she was not dropping out of the race for the GOP nomination for president in 2024. And with that comes some interesting statements that she made during the press conference and arguments that were presented that I'd like to take just a few minutes and examine. But let us first start laying the table with an article from CNBC. Headline: Nikki Haley vows to stay in 2024 race after raising $16.5 million in January. Article written by Rebecca Picchio. We read the following. Former South Carolina Governor and GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley on Tuesday delivered a clear message. She has the means and the motivation to ensure the Republican primary does not end anytime soon. During a speech billed as a, quote, state of the race update, Haley said she intends to stay in the 2024 election regardless of her performance in the upcoming South Carolina Republican primary. Quote, South Carolina will vote on Saturday, but on Sunday, I'll still be running for president. I'm not going anywhere, Haley said in Greenville, South Carolina. Trump is leading by roughly 30 points in Haley's home state, according to a recent poll from USA Today and Suffolk University. Quote, some of you, perhaps a few of you in the media, came here today to see if I'll be dropping out of the race. Well, I'm not. Far from it, Haley said. Haley says she will campaign at least through Super Tuesday, March 5th, when 16 states and territories, totaling over a third of all GOP delegates, will be at stake. Haley's bullishness suggests that even in the face of daunting odds, she still has two essential ingredients to mount a political campaign: resolve and funding. Quote, we have the resources to go the distance, a spokesperson for Haley's campaign told CNBC, noting that January was the campaign's strongest fundraising month to date, with $16.5 million booked in contributions. The spokesperson also pointed to several instances where Trump's attacks on Haley led to millions of fundraising dollars. For example, Haley raised $1 million in 48 hours after Trump attacked Haley's husband's military service. Haley's presidential campaign initially picked up steam late last year when she secured high-profile financial support from names like billionaire Charles Koch's political network, Americans for Prosperity Action, and a flurry of Wall Street mega donors. Those networks lent her the clout and financing to kick her campaign into high gear. In recent weeks, some of those donors have tightened their wallets. Billionaire Reid Hoffman, for instance, said he would pause his Haley donations after her loss in the New Hampshire primary. Nonetheless, Haley's robust fundraising has been a nagging thorn in Trump's campaign's side. One day after Haley secured 43% of the New Hampshire vote, for example, the former president took to social media to declare that any Haley donors would be, quote, permanently barred from the MAGA camp. That threat drove $2 million in contributions over 48 hours to the Haley campaign, according to a Haley spokesperson. Okay, let's get into this. Some comments at the beginning. For anyone who's watching this video and you are a supporter of Nikki Haley, I don't have a disagreement with you. You have the right to support any candidate you wish. I may not agree with your choice, but I respect your right to choose whichever candidate you want to vote for. The same as if Ron DeSantis were still in the race, Chris Christie, or Vivek Ramaswamy, or any other GOP candidate who had decided at one point to run. My issue is not with Nikki Haley's voters. My complaint is with Nikki Haley. Now, I want to present two different statements that she made during this press conference. The press conference itself ran almost a half an hour. And, well, I shouldn't really call it a press conference as much as it is a speech on her part. But there's two arguments that she makes among many of them during this, and I want to deal with the first one. This is a statement about Republican politicians and their view of Donald Trump. Folks, do me a favor and take a listen to this.
We've all heard the calls for me to drop out. We all know where they're coming from. The political elite, the party bosses, the cheerleaders in the commentator world. The argument is familiar. They say I haven't won a state, that my path to victory is slim. They point to the primary polls and say I'm only delaying the inevitable. Why keep fighting when the battle was apparently over after Iowa? Look, I get it. In politics, the herd mentality is enormously strong. A lot of Republican politicians have surrendered to it. The pressure on them was way too much. They didn't want to be left out of the club. Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud.
Okay, I want to stop there for a second and parse through some of that. Donald Trump is a disaster for the Republican Party, but nobody is willing to say it out loud. Well, number one, I don't think that's really been a problem for a lot of Republican politicians. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Let's see, Mitt Romney, Mike Pence, Mitch McConnell, any number of different Republican politicians have been none too happy with the idea of Trump securing the Republican nomination for a third time. But it's the whole, he's a disaster for the party that I do have a little bit of problem with. And not necessarily because I'm trying to be contrary, but it's just that at this moment, the evidence doesn't support that. Let me show you some polling that's recently come out. Folks, take a look at this. I go back to realclearpolitics.com. The current average lead in the aggregate of polls for Donald Trump against Joe Biden is 1.6%. But you're starting to notice something, and it's a solid trend. Let me enlarge this just a little bit. You will see some polls, like, for example, Morning Consult, which is by no means a Republican-friendly poll. You've also got Marist, which has Biden barely with a lead of 0.1. But all the other polls, to one degree or another, show Donald Trump with a lead. The most recent poll just came out today, Rasmussen showing a 6-point lead in head-to-head against Trump versus Biden. And if you take in a multi-person race, it's still a 6-point lead. But there is more news that's come out even since then. Hang on, I'll pull it up here real quick. This hasn't come out in Real Clear Politics average of polls. It will probably hit tomorrow. Take a look at this. This is from the Harris X poll. This is just about to break. It'll come out officially tomorrow. Among all voters spread out over a period of February 12th to February 16th, which is 3,000 voters nationwide, plus or minus 1.8% margin of error, Trump has a 9-point lead. Take it one step further. If you include leaners, in other words, take out the undecided and force someone to say, hey, who are you voting for? Trump's lead drops by 1 point, but more importantly, he goes over 50%. In that same poll, again, if you take out leaners and you put in multiple individuals, still an 8-point lead, and it doesn't diminish. Ladies and gentlemen, I point all this out to point out a very important fact. In 2020, Donald Trump never led in polls going into the election. As a matter of fact, on average, most polls had Joe Biden up anywhere from 5 to 10 points. If I remember the aggregate correctly in 2020 on RCP, he had a lead of about, I don't know, 8, 9 points. The election wound up being a lot closer than that. Biden won nationally by about, I want to say it was 4%. But my point is this: if Donald Trump is such a disaster and he's so harmful to the party, then why is it with 8 months to go until the election, he's doing this well at this point against Joe Biden? Now, granted, all of that could change. I'm not saying it couldn't, but if he's this grotesque disaster that Nikki Haley is purporting him to be, then why is he beating Joe Biden? Let's go back to another statement that was made during that press conference. Take a listen to this. I want to get your guys' take on it. This is fairly interesting. Check this out.
Shot. The Democrats are getting weaker by holding a coronation for Biden. Republicans will get stronger through a vigorous competition.
Okay, that's a very nice applause line, but let's break that down a little bit. Republicans will get stronger in the midst of a vigorous campaign process. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. There's just one problem. This race that remains between Trump and Haley is not a vigorous campaign process. It's not a competition anymore. Now, I know what some people are going to say. Oh, you're just saying that because you don't want to see Nikki Haley win. Oh, you're right. I don't want to see Nikki Haley win. I have policy disagreements with Nikki Haley, and I have political disagreements with Nikki Haley. I don't think she's the best nominee to go head to head with Joe Biden. But laying aside what I may think, let us start looking at some legitimate polls. This is South Carolina. Right now, Donald Trump has, on average, a 25-point lead in South Carolina. Now, after South Carolina, the next thing that comes up is the Michigan primary. How's she doing there head to head against Trump? On average, she's losing by 50 points. If you thought South Carolina was bad, Michigan has got the potential to absolutely be a catastrophic wipeout. What comes up after Michigan? Super Tuesday. 16 different states and territories will allocate about a third of all the Republican delegates. Theoretically, if Trump runs the table, he could wrap up the Republican nomination by the night Super Tuesday. If not on Super Tuesday, he'll do it shortly thereafter. That's how insurmountable the lead is going to be and how large an advantage he'll have in delegates. So how's he doing in some of the Super Tuesday states? Here's California. He's beating Nikki Haley by 50 points. Texas. He's beating Nikki Haley by 71 points. North Carolina. He's beating Nikki Haley by 55 points. Oklahoma. Probably anywhere around 70 points. Now, again, I have not a dispute one with anybody who is voting for Nikki Haley. If she's your choice and you feel that she meets your policy and political persuasion, by all means, vote for Nikki Haley. I do not fault her voters for their choice. I may not agree with it, but I don't fault them for it. But the argument that says that somehow this is a vigorous process that will make the Republican Party stronger, it's just not true. Whatever brand of Republicanism she's trying to sell, no one's buying. Now, arguments could be made whether that's good or bad, but the fact of the matter is she's not going to beat Trump. Now, she's right. She has the right to continue in this race, and yes, the voters need to be heard from. I'm not trying to deny them their choice. My complaint is this: she's not helping her party as far as the November election is concerned. For right or wrong, for better or worse, Donald Trump is going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. Far better to go ahead and consolidate support, money, manpower now, and get this race for the White House going for November as early as possible. He'll need every advantage he can get. He's going to be out fundraised. He'll have different disadvantages thrown at him. So better to get this thing organized early on and right now. So, in light of all that, why is she still doing this, and what's going to be the net effect of it? Well, let's take a look at some thoughts on this from various people. The Associated Press, check this out. Nikki Haley hasn't won a GOP contest yet, but she's vowing to keep fighting Donald Trump, and the first line says a lot. There are no wins on the horizon for Nikki Haley. Those close to the former UN ambassador, the last major Republican candidate standing in Donald Trump's path to the GOP's 2024 nomination, are privately bracing for a blowout loss in her home state in South Carolina on Saturday, and they cannot name a state where she is likely to beat Trump in the coming weeks. Now, the AP is not Breitbart, it's not Newsmax, it's not Fox News. It is an independent news organization. But they're not the only ones expressing opinions on this. From Twitter, Brendan Dilley, host of The Dilley Show, says the following. Nikki Haley's in the primary race for two reasons. Number one, the longer she's in, the longer it keeps Trump from accessing general election funds for campaigning against Biden. And by prolonging her campaign, Nikki is preventing Trump from receiving White House briefings as the nominee. Yeah, I'm not so sure I necessarily agree with all that, because that goes to a question of motive, and no one can quite read her mind. A few other thoughts. And this one, I think, is very telling. Maria Bartiromo hosted a couple of individuals, one of them named Michael Lee, who is a Republican strategist. And I want you to listen to something. Now, I asked the question, why is she doing it? And what is the potential net effect of her staying in? Folks, this runs about a minute. Take a listen to this, because I think this is very interesting.
Vice President, he said one thing and one thing only that matters, and that is that person ready to step in, become president at any time? Mm-hmm. Because, Mike, he said, look, things happen. There are emergencies. I have a feeling that Joe Biden did not use the same criteria when choosing Kamala Harris. It's just my guess here.
Yeah, well, I do not believe that was Joe Biden's criteria. And look, yeah. I'll just say this with Nikki Haley. At this point, she's like a suicide bomber on the entire Republican Party. Okay, in addition to repeating every single Dem talking point about Donald Trump, she's only in the race to waste Donald Trump's resources and to slow him down from focusing on the general. And in addition to that, what she's doing and why she has support is she's using the Democrat get out the vote operation. So she's getting independents that are actually Democrats and Democrats to switch party affiliation to vote in the Republican primary. And what this is going to do is dirty up the data for Republicans for the next 2 to 3 election cycles in every state she's run in. Okay, because they're going to send door knockers, mailers, text messages, phone calls to Democrats that will never, ever vote Republican, all for the sole reason of trying to slow down Trump's run to the White House. Okay, this is damage that's going to continue on for possibly a decade that she's doing right now. So it is a disaster. She has no chance or no future in the Republican Party. I actually think she might switch to becoming a Democrat. And in terms of Trump's vice presidential pick, there's a 0.0 chance either Haley or DeSantis will be the vice president. I'd say DeSantis doesn't want to do it. If he wanted to do it, he never would have ran for president. So that's a pretty big impediment. I think it's going to be somebody that's kind of in the inside. My hope is Dr. Ben Carson.
Yeah, it could.
Okay. Now, do I necessarily agree with everything he's saying? No. But he does bring up some good points, and this is something that Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, has pointed out on more than one occasion. Her support right now is not coming from the base of the Republican Party. No, there are Republicans who are voting for her. I'm not saying there aren't. But the overwhelming majority of people she's trying to get are Democrats and independents. Well, they vote in a Republican primary, and going forward, those names, that frankly is a waste of time to send them anything by way of mailers or flyers or letters or anything else. That's going to be in Republican voter lists for years to come. It will take years to sort all that stuff out. Now, I can hear some people right now, well, it's not a big deal. It shouldn't matter. Yeah, but the issue is this. If Joe Biden's going to be defeated this November, and he will still be a formidable candidate in spite of everything wrong with him, he's going to have the advantage of incumbency and money. It is far better now to consolidate support around the person who more than likely will be the nominee. Again, if people want to vote for whatever candidate they wish, I don't dispute them. I don't have an argument with them. Let them vote however they wish. But for her to make the argument that this is still a vigorous process that needs to go on in light of the polls, in light of her losses, in light of everything else, with all due respect to her, is absolutely ridiculous. But that's what I've got to say about it. What do you think? As we start to wrap up this video, please do me some favors as always. Number one, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please do so. Number two, please hit the bell for notifications. I want to make sure you're always aware when new videos, new live streams are coming out. Number three, please leave a comment below. Number four, share the video around. And finally, give me a thumbs up. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your Front Porch Conservative, and I will see you next time.